Welcome to the Total Soccer Show. I am Daryl Grove, and I'm joined by a man who is no longer an interim co-host. He's got a permanent deal. It's Taylor Rockwell. Hello.
Hello. You removed the interim and docked my pay.
So, Gareth Southgate is now the permanent manager of England for 4 years.
Yeah.
4 years.
Yes.
Which means if 2018 World Cup goes badly, he's still the manager of England and they'll have to pay him out.
Yeah. But by the same token, it's what? The lowest amount an England manager's been paid in 16 years?
Yeah.
Which is what? That's like 17 coaches ago, I think. So you know, that says something. And maybe they were just like, Gareth, we can stretch it out or you can get 1 year for $6 million. The choice is yours.
It's £1.8 million per year. Right. So it's still not bad. But that is post-Brexit pounds, which aren't worth as much.
Here's me being a dork, is that I think I've seen it written as 6.3. Is the total amount, which means it's probably like 1.78, and someone has rounded up to 1.8 a year.
It's because you've got to fit it in the newspaper headline.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Well, if you're the Sun, you've got to have 90-point font somehow, so you got to tighten it up wherever you can.
So I've been asked this question several times. How do I feel about this? I'd like to ask you, how do you feel about Gareth Southgate as the permanent England manager?
At first, underwhelmed because, you know, it's kind of an underwhelming appointment if you look at where he's coming from. It's not Fabio Capello. It's not, well, the other two were kind of disappointing as well. But it's not Fabio Capello, basically. Yeah. It's not Jose Mourinho. It's not a huge name. But the more I think about it, the more I think it could probably be a good appointment for England.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. The criticism I've seen expressed in joke form several times
is that it's boring.
Is that it's like when two 40-year-olds have a deal to marry each other if they haven't met anyone else.
Yeah.
Essentially, England is settling for Gareth Southgate. But I've come round to
How has that movie not been made yet? Not the movie you're talking about. No, but because I think you're right. I think that has been the reaction. But I also think there are precedents for why he could be very successful. And someone needs to make that romantic comedy where it's two friends make that deal that they're going to get married when they're 40. And then they do. And it's the best marriage ever. Because that is kind of the modern day story, right?
Yeah.
So maybe that's what it needs to be.
It's like, oh, we were friends already. We should have just done this.
And cue the emails from people saying they've made that movie 50 times.
But I think we're saying the same thing, right? Which is that even though it doesn't seem glamorous, he's not some bombshell. It might be the sensible choice.
I'm trying to think of an actress equivalent, and I've decided not to, or an actor equivalent. Instead, I'm just going to say that I think what he reminds me of, cue the laugh track, is Pep Guardiola and Zinedine Zidane, which is
that's going to take some explaining.
Okay, because both of those coaches were, I think, deemed at their respective clubs as ones for the future, that they were going to manage Barcelona B, Real Madrid B, respectively, and even like youth sides before that. And it was this idea that, you know, one day maybe if things go well, if we need them, then we'll pump them up. And in both situations, the coaches before them weren't working well. They got fired, and it was like, all right, you're up, man. See what you can do. And then it worked out. I don't know if Gareth Southgate is going to win the World Cup or the Champions League with whomever comes next, but I do think that he's kind of an under-the-radar appointment who's been there for a long time, who knows the setup, who played with the team, who has the respect of the players.
Yeah.
I think it could at very least be a steadying presence that could get decent results.
So if you remove the sort of celebrity aspect of it, then I think you're kind of right. He has the same sort of track record in terms of like working at the lower teams. He was the England under-21 coach for a good few years, 2013.
Right,
when he started
and in Middlesbrough before that.
Right, so but he's been in the England system for those 3 years, right, since 2013, the same way that Zidane and Guardiola were. So I can see where you're tracking with this, and that those two worked out just fine. We're going to talk about Zidane and Real Madrid later when we preview our Clasico. But the difference is that sort of that sprinkle of magic, that sort of celebrity, pizzazz, and charisma. You would never say that Zidane was lacking that, or that Guardiola was lacking that, because they had these sort of stellar careers. That then they don't get the same criticism that Southgate does.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a fair point. And I think it's something that we'll have to see how Southgate deals with that, because it's also a strange thing because he is kind of a low-key, sort of boring appointment, I guess. I think I was listening to Football Weekly today, and the response was sort of like, it's fine. And I think, but with that comes, like, you can't be outraged by it. If you are the reporter who makes his or her money by like publicly criticizing the manager and like, how can you justify paying him this much? This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's kind of like your approach to Gareth Southgate is going to be like, all right, well, you know, we'll see what happens.
Right.
And it maybe buys him a little more time and puts him under a little less pressure.
And to back you up, the idea of like a manager needs to have some pre-existing celebrity to be a good hire. I think we've always come down to we've always sort of agreed that that's not necessarily a good idea. Like having charisma, being famous doesn't make you a good manager. Right?
No, I mean, it helps, and it can definitely lend you an air of authority, especially when you're taking over a high-pressure, big-time gig.
Yeah.
There's also the argument to be made that while it is still a very high-pressure gig, it might not be the most glamorous anymore. Because England, it's not Spain, it's not Germany, it's not even Italy or the Netherlands or Belgium. It's a country that has lots of problems with the system that leads to maybe a lack of players that are available, and you kind of get criticized if you don't call in people. So you have, I mean, I'm not saying that this is like a big loss for England, but you have players like Wilfried Zaha, who have played for England in the past, making that switch to the Ivory Coast because they're not getting looks. I'm not saying that he would if it was a better manager, but I am saying that you don't
He would need Raheem Sterling and Adam Lallana to stop existing.
Yeah, very true. But I feel like there is that sort of like, who are you bringing in? Who's this guy? Oh, this is ridiculous. There's so much reaction to the England manager making even tiny changes that I think it creates this pressurized situation without much justification, if that makes sense.
All right, so maybe steady hand on the rudder, like nice, calm, sensible manager.
Yeah,
things may work out. I feel like I'm grasping at straws every time I get optimistic about an England manager because I'm disappointed every time. So maybe the time when you don't set your expectations high, that's the time it works out. Just law of averages. I am grasping at several straws here, right? Did I grab any?
Yeah. I don't know. I guess we'll have to wait and see. But I think I am starting to come around to. I mean, England are my second national team. I would say they're your first national team.
Yeah.
And I am starting.
But
I am starting to see that feeling of like, really again? Because I've had that twice with Roy Hodgson. I was like, I think he's going to do it this time. Like, no expectations because he was just appointed in 2012. No expectations going to 2014. Not so great. Maybe 2016 though he's going to. He didn't figure it out. But Sam Allardyce, maybe it could. Okay, that didn't work. So you start to sort of see that pattern and hope it doesn't repeat itself, and only time will tell until Arsene Wenger becomes available.
All right, on the rest of today's show, he said, moving swiftly on from the England manager debate, we are going to review that crazy MLS Eastern Conference Final second leg between Toronto FC and Montreal Impact, which really was a great game to watch. We've seen it, twice now between us?
Yep.
We've seen the goals many times.
Well, between us 4 times, yeah.
So much to pick apart. We're going to talk about the U17s who had a big win, the US Under-17s. Won't even spoil it now because it's something exciting to talk about later.
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous.
We're going to talk El Clasico. We're going to preview El Clasico, which, if it snuck up on you, it is this Saturday morning, 10:15 Eastern, 7:15 a.m. Pacific time. Barcelona versus Real Madrid. And we'll close, of course, with the TSS Scouting Network.
These are facts.
Should we start then with that Eastern Conference Final?
We should, with the caveat that I think we're, at this point, 7.5 minutes in, which means it's going to be a long show, and I think that means both of us are fighting a little bit of illness, so this might be our last show for the week. Yeah, so, we've kind of decided no Friday show this week because, we're both fighting a bit of illness, and if you work for yourself, you should at least be able to give yourself the day off, right? Yes, that said, we may be back Saturday, depending on how that Clasico game goes. But we shall see. But tomorrow I'm going to phone in sick to you, and you can phone in sick to me. Deal. That seems like the most logical course of action. I like it. Let's do it. All right, MLS Eastern Conference Final. It was, let's see if I get my math right, 5-2 to Toronto on the night. It was 7-5 to Toronto overall. I believe that is correct. I had to do this math while doing the goal mouth last night through bloodshot eyes at 12:15. So I think that's correct. It was a great game. It's kind of odd that it all happened in Canada because we've all been waiting for this big, exciting MLS game between American teams. But it did involve Michael Bradley, Josie Altidore. There's plenty of American interest, right? I don't even know where to start. I would start with the overall narrative, which is that we have taken the line many times that a 0-0 draw can be really, really exciting and it can be a beautifully played game of soccer. And a game with as many goals as last night's game had can also be kind of an ugly game. And this was an ugly game of soccer, but it was wildly entertaining and really, really fun to watch and incredibly captivating. There were a lot of direct balls, a lot of mistakes, defensive mistakes, but also just a lot of physical challenges, a lot of kickouts, a lot of challenges that probably should have been cards but weren't. Right. So it was physical and feisty, but really, really fun. I think the difference was atmosphere as well. You could really feel it. So when I rewatched it in the office here this morning, I watched it for the first time in the office, but I knew the score. I watched the last 15 minutes of regular time, and you were like, there's no more goals here, right? And I'm like, yeah, but it feels like there are. There's an electricity in the atmosphere as you watch it, right? Yeah, and then John Strong had what will probably become one of the immortal lines from this one. As if it wasn't dramatic enough, now the fog is rolling in off of whatever lake is on Toronto was on. Ontario? I'm not sure. But that made it even more insane because there was like torrential rain, then there was fog rolling, and then there were smoke bombs. It was a festive evening.
So where shall we start in terms of breaking this game down? Corner kicks? It's
tough to say. Yeah, let's go corner kicks.
Because the record shows that Toronto had 4 corner kicks in this game.
And?
They scored on 3 corner kicks.
That's impressive. It's 75% conversion rate is decent.
It's an anomaly.
Given that I think it's usually like 8%, maybe. Yeah. I think 8% of the time you get a shot off of a corner. Right. So, not bad.
Now you're a stats expert, right?
I think I'm quoting the numbers game here.
Do I have to call Bruce Arena and tell on you?
No, he's already turned off the podcast.
We've got a stats nerd here.
I wouldn't worry about it.
Should we talk about how Toronto did that then?
Sure.
It's not just that Montreal are terrible at defending set pieces, right? Well, they're not great at it.
Yeah.
But I think on each corner, Toronto did something impressive.
Yes. So starting with the first goal, I think what they did was recognize maybe a mismatch between who comes in and heads the ball?
Haglund,
thank you. And it's Donadell marking him, theoretically.
Yeah.
But Toronto do this thing, and I think you picked up on this, which is they start outside of the box and they run in. So by the time that ball is delivered and coming in, they're running to meet it instead of standing in like a static position or have run already to their spot. Now they have to jump vertically. Instead, in this situation, it's Haglund running at full speed and Donadell being like, I'll try to jump, I guess. Yeah. And he doesn't, but Haglund does, gets that header, it's cleared off the line, but eventually becomes a goal.
Cooper buries it in the end. And the way it works is, as Giovinco's starting his run-up for the corner kick, then Haglund and a couple others, maybe 3 or 4 other Toronto players, start their run at pace towards the 6-yard box.
Right.
So they're arriving at pace. It ends up Haglund is goal side of Donadell,
right?
Which should be the other way around if you're the defending player.
Yeah. So rises to meet it. Not for the first time, not for the last time that evening, rather, for the first time. And then Cooper does just a good job to be in the right position, scrap, put that ball in the back of the net.
But he's in the right position because he's goal side of his marker, who I believe was a younger.
Right.
Yeah.
So you've got that goal. Then I think what's important to note is after the goal for Toronto, which was the equalizer, you have a free kick on the left-hand side of the field that is taken by Sebastian Giovinco.
Yes.
And if you watch that...
It looks awful, right?
Yeah, yes, it looks terrible. But if you watch it again with the knowledge that they then score off of that near post corner, and Josie does that nice little flick on header directional into the near post, you realize that they were aiming for it there as well. And it looks like maybe Armando Cooper slips. I think it was Cooper.
Yeah.
He slips and thus can't get on the end of that near post ball. But had he have gotten there, it's the exact same ball in. It's just a little bit slower, it's a little bit lower, and not quite as powerful as driven.
And if you're watching at the time, if I watched that live and thought... Sorry, I didn't watch that live. I watched it the first time.
Yeah.
I thought, that's weird that Giovinco's terrible at delivering a cross. Right. Turns out he's not. It was just that Cooper got tripped up on the way to exactly where Giovinco wanted it to be.
And then if you watch the first goal... You'll notice that it's Bernadello, I think, is on the near post. So he is hugging that post. He, in his probably concussed state, is hugging that post.
More on that later.
Yeah. For when you have it on the opposite side of the field, when you have that free kick, no one is on that near post.
Yeah.
Which I think points to not that Giovinco figures it out and is a genius, which is what it looks like when Josie does score. You see them talk beforehand.
Yeah. Because Josie's about to take that corner quickly, right? And instead Giovinco's going, no.
Yeah.
And then they do the thing.
But I think that points to preparation. And I wasn't inclined to give Greg Vanney as much credit as you were. I think I've changed that a little bit now.
So when you hear Greg Vanney, the audio of him yelling, I think a lot of people are like, oh, that's not particularly impressive to hear the way he yells at people and the things he's saying. But Toronto did look like a team that had all the information they needed about Montreal on set pieces. Maybe it's not Greg Vanney. Maybe it's someone in the stats
I think
department.
It is just based on his celebrations and how... I have coached before when I've noticed something and a player executed and it worked and been like, yes, I got it right. And you can just see that little element of self-satisfaction versus we scored a goal, great, but sort of haha, I know I made that happen.
But we're pretty confident that Toronto knew that the near post was not being defended. There was not a man on the near post for Montreal, and therefore it was on for Giovinco to whip it in at the near post, Josie Altidore to make that sort of darting run, sort of from the middle, at pace, really aggressively to the near post.
Yep.
The glancing header was on. Right?
It was absolutely on, and it's a great run from Josie Altidore, who really just accelerates into it, wins that header, and I forget who it is who's defending it.
Mancosu.
Mancosu standing still, jumps up to head it, and then still tries to head it, not realizing that Josie has beaten him to it.
He doesn't even jump. He thinks he can just stand there and head it away, and by the time he does the header motion, Josie Altidore has already glanced it past him and into the back of the net.
Right.
That's how good it was.
So that, to me, I think the second goal off the corner is more indicative of watching film and having a plan than the first one. But I think the third goal off of the corner is as well. That's the one that puts them up 3-2, they being Toronto. That's what essentially sends them into extra time.
Yeah.
And on that one, and the analogy I can do is having been a place kicker, having kicked off. I
always forget that you place kicked, yeah.
The way you kind of target the onside kick in an unexpected time. Do you know how an onside kick works?
Is this onside kick is when you take kickoff for the football team, like NFL or college football here? I think instead of giving the opposition the ball, you're trying to get possession of the ball for yourself. So you sort of kick it like almost sideways.
It's basically the ball has to travel 10 yards and then it's live. So you have to get at the minimum distance of 10 yards. So even if on a kickoff, say the kicker miskicked it, but it went 40 yards and nobody caught it and it bounced, that ball is live. Anybody can field it.
Right.
So that's what you're doing. And the way a lot of coaches will spring that surprise is if they watch the footage, the other team who are receiving, their blockers aren't supposed to move until the ball is kicked. But if on the footage they notice that the blockers have started to run away before the ball is kicked, then that means those blockers are no longer paying attention to the kick coming. So then they'll try that onside kick with the idea that no one is paying attention. It felt like that was something that Toronto did for that go-ahead goal, is that basically they had spotted...
I wondered when we would arrive here. Now I understand.
It seemed like maybe the video had shown them that Montreal were very slow to react to the short corner.
Yes.
And that they weren't going to send the appropriate number of people, and they weren't going to... even because really all you need to eliminate that kind of short corner option is to have one person standing... I think you have to be, again, like 10 yards away. There's that little line there. And if you have someone standing there, then it kind of negates the... attractiveness of that option. But since Montreal didn't have anybody there, Toronto played short. So now it's a 2v1 situation. Should be 2v2.
It's Morrow and Cooper, right?
Yes, and then it's Damaduro is the one who's supposed to come out and help. And he has the slowest jog you could possibly have. Clearly, I think, again, as you pointed out, showing that he thinks, they're just going to try to come inside. I'll stand a little bit inside and wait for them to come to me, and then I'll defend.
So Piatti's with Cooper. Yeah, Aduro is... farther inside, and he's waiting for Morrow to come to him.
Aduro's in Aduro space, basically.
Right, and he's waiting for Morrow to come to him. Morrow sprints outside.
Right.
And I think as the ball is played down the line for Morrow, you see Piatti just throw his hands in the air like...
They both do. They both look like, wait, nobody else was defending that? And it did feel a little bit like Aduro was like, yeah, me too, right? Like, I'll throw my hands up, and then I get to look like I'm frustrated by that as well, because he clearly should have been there marking that ball in. Meantime, Nick Hagland has done a really smart run of kind of run in and then checked back out. And again, Donadell has tried to track that run.
He's like a steamroller coming.
Has completely lost him, and so then there's an 8-yard gap between the two of them, which Hagland then closes aggressively, jumps about as high as a human can jump, and crushes that ball from a good 12 to 14 yards out. It's a beautiful header, but again, I would say that's master set piece theater.
Oh, okay. Yes, I'm into it.
In fact, I think I have that in my notes.
All right, so the other thing I want to talk about here,
sure,
because we haven't mentioned him properly yet, Josie Altidore. Josmir Volmi Altidore. Maybe...
Josie always score.
So he scored one in this game, correct? He celebrated Tosin Rickett's goal as if he'd scored it.
He did.
He did do all kinds of... that's the goal that essentially wins the game, right? Is when it's basically just a long ball, more or less. Altidore holds it up, turns, accelerates, squares it for Ricketts, right? Beats about 3 people in that move. But here's the thing I want to give him credit for is... almost, I think all the corners we talked about, at least the first 2 corners in the first half, are won by Josie Altidore.
They are.
Right?
And again, the first one is, I think it's Bernardello is supposed to be tracking Josie Altidore and doesn't. And then when you watch him try to track him, it's this weird, like he's looking at Josie's feet and I think trying not to trip him up, but it looks so uncoordinated that, again, it speaks to the fact that this is a player who looked to me to be unconscious in that collision with Josie Altidore, and I think like the 22nd minute, maybe it was. Looked like he was 13th. Unconscious. Thank you. Oh, that's really? Was it 13? Man, that is a long time to play. Because he gets hit. You can see that sort of whiplash motion. That like really, if it was a fight, if it was a like boxing match, it would be over. Because of that movement, you know that he has been knocked unconscious.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, when he lands, his head bounces off the ground.
Yep.
He goes out. He's on the ground for 2 minutes. They roll him over on his side. I would assume that's because they're worried that he's going to die.
Right,
basically, if they don't. Right.
Yeah.
And then takes 2 minutes. He recovers-ish, jogs off, and immediately comes back on. To the extent that you can hear Greg Vanney screaming at the Montreal coaches like, he got hit in the back of the head.
Yeah.
Why are you guys letting him back on the field?
Yeah, I think he's saying, doesn't he say like, Biello, your guys need to look at him?
He says like, Biel, make sure they check him. He got hit in the back of the head or something like that.
All right, so, okay, we'll lavish praise on Josie Altidore
Yeah.
later. We have to talk about this concussion incident because people are, I think, quite rightly kind of outraged that he's allowed to come back on so quickly. And like you said, on that, for those couple of plays after, he's standing upright and he's running around, but he's definitely not 100% with it.
No,
right?
I mean, he goes into like a defensive crouch the way you would if someone who was dribbling at you and you're getting set to defend. He does that a couple different times when the player's 30 yards away about to cross the ball, which is just a very like strange thing to see. And then again, that tracking of Josie Altidore, it is clearly not like I'm trying to make a play. It is clearly not I'm trying to like shadow him in case the ball comes loose. It is very much like, oh, he's running. I'm doing my best to kind of stay there, but I really can't. And
he comes off at halftime.
It
seems like he should have come off sooner. I
don't
know what we have to do, right? Everybody talks about it when it happens. Pressure seems to be put on the organization on Major League Soccer to make sure this doesn't happen. I know that, like little sidebar, I've been trying to prepare to do my e-license coaching. The concussion protocols are a gigantic part of it.
Yeah.
I know that's for coaching kids, but still, you think that reflects what
you would
soccer
think, right?
want to do, right? And yet we have a player able to just come straight back on, even though he's clearly taken a shoulder to the head, then his head's hit the floor, then he's been definitely unconscious for a few seconds, right?
Yeah.
I don't know what has to happen.
I think sadly it has to be a rule change, and it's not even the rule change about like you get suspended if you come back on the field. I think it has to be the substitution rule. I think you have to allow for an extra substitution if there's a suspected concussion or concussion syndromes or concussion symptoms. Excuse me. If it's concussion syndrome, that's a much larger problem. But I think that's what it has to be. There has to be a way so that you're basically not punished if you have to make that change, essentially. Because then, if it is the 13th minute, then all of a sudden you've burned a substitution in a game that goes 120 minutes. It becomes an issue. Yeah, it's almost as if the coach and the player, they're the worst people to decide whether there should be a substitution because they're so focused on winning the game. There needs to be someone who's like player safety. Yeah, is there? If only there were medical. He's called the referee, isn't he, as well? Or the fourth official, or the medical team. Any number of the people there. It's just it comes down to it's a playoff game. Nobody wants to be the one who's at fault for having a player leave who maybe didn't need to leave. Right. You never want to be the one who says like, oh no, he needs to come off, and then it turns out he was totally fine, and then you lose the playoffs because you had to burn a sub. Right. So it's a difficult issue that I think requires rule changes before any like successful resolution is going to be found. I think what we can do in the meantime, I know it might get repetitive, but we're going to talk about this every time it happens, right? Because I think people need to know about it each time to make sure. Yeah, and I think in this case, if we're going to talk about it, then we also have to talk about how it happened. And it happened with Josie Altidore slamming into him. Right, because the segue to we accidentally talked about this concussion issue was because of Altidore's aggression, right? It is. Josie Altidore goes up. He claims there's a push in the back. There's a little push in the back, not enough for what happened. No. His shoulder hits Bernadello's head, right? That's why this happens. I kind of don't want to put too much blame on Josie because I don't think he's trying to whack his shoulder into Bernadello's head. I think he's just aggressively going for the ball, and then this is kind of just an accident in many ways. Yeah, again, to go with the football analogy, it was a little bit like a defenseless receiver going through the middle. Like, that's what it felt like here, was that basically Bernadello was going up for the ball, I think doesn't see Josie Altidore coming, and you can see on the slow motion, Josie Altidore is going for the header. It's not like he's just going in to murder somebody. And then I think realizes, I'm not going to get this. And you can see him kind of go into that like defensive, head down, shoulders up, arms together, like I'm going to try to protect myself as much as I can. But the other guy can't do that. And so when you have that collision, one's going to have a kind of hurt shoulder and one's going to have a concussion. Right. So Josie's aggression, I think, obviously it's not good that it caused a concussion, but also he's not to blame. It's kind of the reason Toronto won this game. Yeah. Because we started by talking about this, that he won the first two corners, right? The first one, he is the near... Sorry, this is the second one. The one just before halftime. It's him pressuring defenders. He is all over. Number 36, I'm sorry, I forgot his name, the Montreal centre-back. Doesn't give him any time and space on the line. Forces him backwards. Forces him into a terrible back pass to Bush because it goes out for a corner kick. It does. That's how bad it is. Bush can't even get to it. Yep. So you got that. You've got the corner that he forced in the beginning. Then you've got, as you said, the Ricketts goal where it's basically just a ball hoof long that Josie Altidore is able to settle, then use his strength to hold off the defender, then use his skill to turn, then use his pace to get by, and then square. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of everything you want to see from Josie Altidore in like peak form.
And that's why he's going to pull his hamstring in mid-March, just before we play Honduras.
Let's not do that. Let's not have that happen. So we've sung Josie's praises. I think we probably have to talk about his U.S. national team teammate, because it was another it was another game where Michael Bradley did some good things, and then we had a few different people say maybe that wasn't so great from Captain Michael.
Yeah. Okay. So Montreal's first goal is kind of a microcosm of all the some of the good and a lot of the criticisms you can lay at the feet of Michael Bradley. Right. Mm-hmm. This is the Aduro goal. Let me explain the play to you. I know you know, Taylor. Let me explain the play to our listeners. It starts with a beautiful Michael Bradley diagonal chip pass from the centre out left to Morrow, who essentially finds himself one-on-one with the keeper. And if Morrow was more of a striker, he would have hit that first time and scored. Instead, he kind of fluffs it by trying to go back across the box, right? The ball works its way back around to Michael Bradley, who tries essentially the exact same ball to bite ashore to the right, but hits it. It just doesn't hit it cleanly. It comes way too far in field. And I think it's Ayunga heads it clear, and Montreal are on the break. Right. The ball comes to Bernier in midfield. There is essentially a 50-50 moment between Bradley and Bernier as he tries to recover.
To his credit, Michael Bradley makes it a 50-50 moment because he is now dropped back into a more defensive position. Bernier receives the ball, or the pass is coming into Bernier, and I think Bradley is maybe a good 15 yards away. He does kind of have the referee in between them. He does a good job to close, but I think has lost a step. And so he doesn't get there as quickly as he thinks he will.
He lost some strength because this ball is always 60-40 Bernier, right? Bradley's first tackle doesn't get the ball cleanly. Bradley's lunge isn't strong enough, and Bernier is essentially able to just body him off, then turn, then play the ball through. I think it's to Piatti or Mancuso that then goes to Aduro and he scores.
Well,
right?
it feels like a player who is relying on plan A without having a plan B. So I think his plan A is like, I'll get there fast, I'll close, I'll poke that ball away, and then we'll get possession. Right. And when he overcommits and doesn't get the ball right away, then he has to kind of scramble to figure out what to do. And once you're scrambling and the other guy is in control of the ball, you're in trouble. And then he has to try to overcommit to make another tackle, and then he loses that physical challenge.
And if you're new to the grand Michael Bradley debate, this happened against Portugal, the 2014 World Cup. This happened against Mexico with Gio dos Santos in the most recent World Cup qualifier. Right. And both resulted in the US conceding a goal.
And I believe it happened in the first leg against Montreal as well. That I think he didn't do a very good job of closing. He didn't do a very good job of tracking. In that situation...
That was Bernier again from space and passed through.
We didn't. And then I think it was Ayunga who he just blazes by Michael Bradley. That would happen as well. And I think similarly here, once Bradley is beaten, I don't necessarily hate that he doesn't sprint back and try to make another play. Right. Because again, it's a situation when he's got 4-5 defenders behind him who I think he can see, recognizes that if he tries to make a play, he's far more likely to concede a free kick or a foul.
He's going to run into the back of him.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm kind of okay with that lack of a sprint there that I think frustrates a lot of people.
He's jogging to get back into possession to, if Will Johnson makes a tackle, if Drew Moore takes a tackle, that ball pops loose, Bradley collects it, the play starts again. He probably ends up playing another diagonal ball.
Yeah. So I don't necessarily hate that, but I do hate that kind of loss of the challenge at midfield because it leads to that goal. And it's worth noting that that's really well done by Montreal. I mean, it's a very quick sequence to get the ball from one end of the field to the other. Yep. It's really good work from, I think it's Mancosu, who plays that ball in for Damaduro, and it's a good finish from Damaduro.
And it's worth noting the reason that space is there is because Michael Bradley is so advanced. If you think of Toronto's it's essentially a 3-5-2, right? But the midfield is Bradley deep, Will Johnson and Cooper ahead, right? It was like a 1-2 in that setup in central midfield. Once Bradley steps out to join the attack, there's the two midfielders still and the space behind. And that's the space that got exploited.
This is true. Now I want to talk about a different aspect of Michael Bradley's game for a second, because a lot of the other criticism we've seen about him, either with Toronto or with the U.S. national team, relates to how he, the balls he chooses to play. Yeah. And I forget who it was, I apologize, but we got a long email about how Bradley chips the ball when he doesn't need to, and he likes to kind of loft the ball out to one side or the other.
He loves a diagonal ball to the left and the right. Yeah.
And sometimes that's not on. I think in a lot of times, in my opinion, it is, and that's why he goes for it. But I think you had a very interesting observation about those kind of long balls over the top or out wide.
Yes, okay, and it's perfect in this play, the two passes beforehand, right? It's because Michael Bradley is right-footed, right? Yep. And when you hit the ball with your right foot, if you use sort of the instep or, the laces but the instep, it will bend naturally to the left. So if you're playing a ball to the left, you can loft it up and it bends out left, and then that's in a good diagonal spot for someone to run onto, right? But when you switch side and do that to the right, it bends too far in. And that is why a Youngo is able to head it away.
Because you see the space he's aiming for, and you're absolutely right, that if that's a left-footed ball, or even like outside of the foot right, Jordan Moore's specialty, then it's going to go into that space but then hold up and kind of bend out. It's going to favor the runner. But if you hit it with the right foot instep, or kind of laces instep, it's going to bend inside and favor the defender.
If I knew more about golf, I'd know which one was a hook and which one was a slice.
Yes, sure. I can do football analogies.
And now we know that you don't
know golf. Oh, yeah. No, I know that I'm terrible at golf. That much I know.
Promise me we will never golf together even when we're 60.
Deal.
Okay.
Unless it's soccer golf, then maybe we still.
Oh, that's very different.
Who's to say? So, I mean, I think that's an interesting observation and one to pay attention to with Michael Bradley.
So my new theory, if I'm right, and I know this is a small sample size, I've used that phrase twice in 2 shows now, is that Bradley's diagonal balls are more effective going to his left than to his right.
All right.
Because of him using his right foot. And I want to keep an eye on that and see if that's true.
We're going to keep an eye on that. We're also going
MLS Cup final.
We're going to keep an eye on how infuriating the new offside rule is for soccer fans as well, because I want to talk about Montreal's second goal.
Okay. Who's officially credited with this goal?
I checked it. It is Piatti. Piatti has the credit for the goal, and I think it's because the argument would be that when it last touched his foot, it was theoretically on goal, which makes it a shot, even though what actually happens is basically he gets the ball, it's kind of chaos in the box. I think no one quite knows where it is in relation to their feet. Piatti is trying to get a foot on it and kind of does, but the player who actually gets a foot on it is Nick Hagglund. He's in this game a lot, and it comes off of his. He basically does this weird I know he's not trying to, but the best way I can explain it is like a Rabona movement where that left foot comes behind his right foot. You can see it on the last slow motion replay that it comes off of his left foot. And even though Damaduro is in an offside position
and is interfering with play, right, which is most people's reasons for this should be ruled out for offside because Aduro's interfering with play, and he sort of helps to bundle it over the line even though he doesn't touch it. Right. Yeah.
But because it's come off the defender, that new rule is it doesn't matter if you meant to or not. If you have touched that ball, if you're the defender, I think the goalkeeper is an exception. But if you're a defender, you touch that ball is live. And so even if Damaduro had then run and smashed that ball home, I think it still would have been a goal. Now, I don't know
provided that's what the referee and crew were thinking,
I don't know if it is. He might have just been looking at that and then seeing Damaduro didn't make contact, that he just kind of continued his run as he did. It's fine. It wouldn't have been fine in that case, but maybe that was their justification. But I think later on, about 10 minutes after, there was another replay, and Brad Friedel correctly said, no, it came off of Nick Hagglund. It should, then Damaduro's onside.
He's nearly as good as Stu Holden.
Yeah, Stu Holden would have gotten that one right away, probably. Which is not a criticism of Brad Friedel. Again, it's praise of Stu Holden, who picks up on things. When I'm really proud that I pick up on stuff, and then I realize that I'm not listening to his commentary, and he said it, I'm like, oh, maybe that's why I figured it out.
And you watched it 4 times.
It's an Always Sunny Dennis and D situation where he'll say something, and then I'll say the same thing a moment later, and then demand credit for it. Doesn't quite work so well, though, in my situation. Nor in Dennis's, for that matter.
Any other business on Toronto's eventual, 7-5 aggregate win over Montreal Impact?
I don't think so. Other than that, again, it was a really, really, really fun game to watch.
It was.
And
even though it wasn't beautiful soccer.
And I will say, I don't always love a sideline reporter. I did enjoy Julie Stewart-Biggs.
Yes.
Because she stuck it out there. There's a part of me, and this is maybe too much explanation, but there was a part of me, so I tweeted that she's a trooper, and then I was like, is that sort of am I being oh, she's being like a guy, so she's cool? In reality, all I mean to say with that is that she stuck out there, did not care about the way she looked, and that is a tough thing to do when you were on.
There were plenty of guys who would be trying to slick their hair down if it was all messy from the rain.
Yeah, I mean that's what I'm saying.
Those guys are not troopers.
Yeah, and you know that a lot of people are going to see you in HD, and her hair was on fleek, I think somebody said in an ironic sort of way. To which she responded, when your hair is a mess, but you don't care because you've just seen the most amazing game of soccer ever. Yeah. And she retweeted a photo of herself with some crazy hair. I think she gets points for not caring. It's more about getting the interviews and getting the commentary in.
Speaking of the most amazing game of soccer, so I saw this thing. It was this game was trending on Twitter in Canada. It was 7 of the top 10 trends in Canada on Twitter with this game. It was in the US also trending. I think because there's a big soccer Twitter, right?
Yeah.
But it's also, does this mark some sort of high point for MLS where the Eastern Conference Final second leg is genuinely just all-out entertainment? It's like a rock and roll show.
I mean, we had a couple different people email to say they had a hard time following Major League Soccer in the regular season and watching on Sunday nights and kind of knowing what was happening, and especially when you don't have the big names in there, it can be difficult. Whereas it's playoff soccer, people like playoffs. You've got the big names. You've already got the billing of Josie and Michael versus Jordan Morris. That might be because Giovinco went off with injury, and we don't know how severe that injury is.
Oh, you're talking about MLS Cup final now. I'm talking about, was this second leg like some high point of entertainment soccer in the US? Did it arrive?
And so that's what I'm saying is, like, but I think when you've got like Drogba on the sidelines and you've got those names in Toronto and you've got that crazy atmosphere, as you mentioned, I think it's a really exciting thing. I think it will be on a list like 5 years from now of the 10 best MLS playoff games ever. But we'll see, because it's still you're still gonna have the cynical people who say, "Oh, MLS is still so bad," and here's a bad touch, and here's a clip of a guy dribbling out of bounds, and therefore it's still a bad league. I disagree with that. I think it should be a high mark, but I guess time will tell.
And MLS Cup final will be, I believe, December 10th. So not this coming weekend. That's reserved for El Clasico. Next weekend. So December 10th. Toronto host Seattle.
That's 7 months after the playoffs began, I think?
I think it feels like it. We've had a lot of things happen in the meantime.
We sure have.
We've had elections. All right. Moving on to the US under-17s.
Let's do it.
So we teased this at the top of the show. The US under-17s beat Portugal in, is it called the Nike Friendlies?
The Nike International Friendlies, yes.
7-1.
Yep.
The US beat Portugal 7-1. Playing the type of soccer we one day hope to see the senior team play, because there was some impressive stuff in here.
I mean, from start to finish, I mean, they were on Portugal very early. I mean, they scored 2 goals in the first 20 minutes, I think, and even the final goal, the 7th goal, it comes about from like a 14 pass sequence thing. That's what Will Parchman tweeted out. That starts with the goalkeeper, goes all the way up the field, goes from left side to right side, back to the left side, all over the pitch. I mean, it's really impressive, and it is the type of soccer that we want to see the senior team play. And again, it's against Portugal. And I can't say that I know much about Portugal's U17s, but I know that Portugal's pretty good. I believe they're the reigning Euro champion. So I would say that it's probably kind of a big deal.
So I've just realised that some of the kids involved in this are also featured in today's scouting reports. Should we hold off until the end of the show?
Yeah, that totally works. Let's hold off, and we'll get to those reports later on, because we do have, 3 players?
3 of the 4 players in today's scouting reports played in that U17 game.
But we can say, congratulations, U17s. Job well done.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So we're going to take a short break for a word from our sponsor. All right, Tyler, we mentioned it at the top of the show. El Clasico is coming this Saturday, 10:15 a.m. Eastern, 7:15 a.m. Pacific. It is Barcelona hosting Real Madrid. Barcelona are 6 points behind Real Madrid in La Liga. It makes this game huge because they either close the gap or they go 9 points behind, or there's still a 6-point gap. Look, whatever the result is, it's kind of dramatic, right? And it's a Barcelona team that isn't in great form. It's a Real Madrid team that actually wasn't brilliant, as we understand it, against Sporting Gijon. But it's an excellent kind of matchup going in, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an efficient Real Madrid team is the way I've seen them explained, which is basically not getting the crazy 9-0 wins on a routine basis, but getting the wins to put them in a position where they're 6 points clear of Barcelona.
Should we start with the broad tactical expectations?
Sure.
So my expectation is Barcelona will try and have possession. Real Madrid will maybe...
No. Yeah, for real?
I've been watching some soccer lately. Real Madrid will probably, if I've seen Zidane coach this before, will sometimes press, but will mostly counter. Right? He's going to let Barca have the ball, and he's going to hit them on the counter.
And I think it will be probably listed as a 4-3-3 for Madrid.
Yeah.
I'd say it's probably going to be closer to a more compact 4-2-3-1 would be my guess.
So, shall we talk about Barcelona then? Because their form has not been wonderful of late. Their performances have not been wonderful of late. But there's a man coming back who could fix all that.
Yeah, it's basically their form hasn't been great over the last 7 games. I think they've only won 3 of those last 7. Those directly coincide with the injury to Andres Iniesta. He's been out since late October. I think he got injured against Valencia. He is expected to return for this game. And I think a lot of Barcelona fans are very pleased with that news, and a lot of Madrid fans are less pleased with that news.
It makes me... As a neutral, it makes me kind of nervous, because the last thing I want to see is Iniesta start this game and we all get hyped about Iniesta, and then he has a clearly not quite ready for primetime performance.
Yeah, that's possible, but I think there's also a chance that Luis Enrique just thought, He's probably back to full fitness. There's no sense risking it. Why not give him one more week of training, but not risk a full match before Madrid?
So maybe he didn't play against, say, Real Sociedad because this game is coming.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Why is he so important? Let's talk about this. I know if you've watched Barcelona a lot, you know why Iniesta's important, but I think unless you really understand what he does, it's harder to pin down.
Well, I think the best way I can explain it is to steal a line from Graham Hunter and Guillaume Balag. Is it Balag or Balage?
Balage.
Balage, there we go.
When he says it,
we listened to them kind of discuss this game in like a 5-minute video or so, and they were basically discussing that Real Madrid are kind of a team of like 18 players, that Zidane has a couple different players that he can throw in based on whatever injuries might be there in the current situation. And again, that's partially because they've had more injuries. We could talk about that in a second. And I think their point with Barcelona was that Barcelona are still sort of that 11, 12-player team. They don't have a lot of like-for-like replacements is the best way to put it. Now, to be fair, that's because there aren't a lot of players who are like Andres Iniesta.
I think
but it's a problem that I think they've had to kind of try to deal with.
If you want to play any sort of high-tempo possession, Andres Iniesta is your guy, right? And if he's missing, then the guys that have been replacing him have been Denis Suarez, I think Andre Gomes, the Portuguese midfielder. Fine players, they're not Andres Iniesta, and suddenly it doesn't quite work the same.
And so we went back and watched Man City's 3-1 win over Barcelona when it was Andre Gomes, not Gomes, not Andres Iniesta in midfield, and you could see that it was more disjointed. They had trouble linking between defense and attack because you kept seeing Busquets get a little bit stranded. You kept seeing
Sergio Roberto got stripped of possession because he couldn't find an outball.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, even what Man City's first goal, it comes about because they put Sergio Roberto under pressure. He doesn't really have anything. Tries to pass through the middle and basically turns it over, and it's a goal straight from that.
To me, I know he does many, many more things, but to me, Andres Iniesta is so good about being the option. Like, if you're in trouble and look up, he's probably found himself some space that you can pass into.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think so. And so when you don't have him, you have those kind of lack of passing options, and I think you just have that lack of fluidity, that lack of familiarity, where he knows what Sergio Busquets is going to do in a way that a younger player who's still very good probably isn't. And so he can't, and we talked about this yesterday with the kind of chemistry that forms with a team that's been playing together. He can anticipate, like, oh, he's going to need me to be here so that I can be that outlet, or he's going to need me to make that run. And I think Andres Iniesta returning to the lineup, it strengthens Barcelona for that reason alone.
Okay, that makes sense. All right. Let's stick with Barcelona for a second then. The other sort of, I want to call them complaints I've heard, or at least the things that people have pinpointed as weaknesses, are that they no longer press like they once did. And we kept a real close eye on Leo Messi in that defeat to Man City. He is, I don't want to say lazy, but he is not involved in winning the ball back as much as I remember him being in the glory days.
Yes.
Right? He is more apt to kind of stroll and wait for the ball to come to him.
But it's tough to know if that's like his laziness or his lack of performance, or if it's something that he's been instructed to do.
Yeah, Enrique could be like, all right, keep your energy, be ready. I mean, he does score in that game, to be fair.
He does, and it comes about because of the fact that he comes central, and that's what he kept doing in that game, and that's what seems to be his proclivity, is to come in from the right, drift in central, to the point where there were multiple times in that game where you'd see Luis Suarez then drop out onto the right-hand side.
Think of, as well, the goal against Real Sociedad. It's Neymar, this is from the past weekend, right? Neymar bursts down the left, squares the ball, top of the box. Who's there? Coming in, Leo Messi. He's not coming in from the right. He's coming centrally and straight. Right.
So then I think once you've made that effort to come inside, or you're focused on where you need to be kind of the fulcrum of the attack, then if you lose the ball, if you turn it over, I think if you're Leo Messi, you probably don't want to sprint back 30 or 40 yards. I think that's not kind of what his game is about, or that's maybe not what he's been instructed to do. But then it does look like a kind of lack of effort overall. And
then I can't shake the feeling that, I mean, this is kind of obvious to say, Barcelona were a better team when Dani Alves was right back. And I'm sure Sergio Roberto is a great player. I've seen him do great things. But the goal we talked about for Man City, where he basically got in trouble, couldn't find a pass. Dani Alves would always make something happen.
Yeah. I think so, and also is just a threat. Yeah. So that it's another player that you have to worry about from an attacking standpoint, even though he's a defender. So then you maybe have to
he used to come into midfield, didn't he? And almost like be like bonus Xavi.
Yeah, and so it's another player that you have to worry about, and you can't commit numbers to a certain space because you have to worry then that you're leaving space open on that other side. Sergio Roberto was a very good player, and again, for those of you listening, I said Sergi, not Sergio. Sergio Roberto is a very good player, but he's not Dani Alves, and he doesn't maybe instill that level of fear, and he doesn't make you have to really think as much as Dani Alves did.
You know who is Dani Alves?
Who's that?
Marcelo.
Well, also Dani Alves. But yes, Marcelo is for sure.
So Real Madrid's left back, Marcelo. I think I've also read some previews pinpointing Marcelo. And it's partly, I think, because he's been there 10 years and all that sort of stuff, as absolutely key to what Real Madrid do. Because even though he does play left back, he tends to, as we talked about Dani Alves, wander upfield, wander infield, like have an influence all over the field from left back, which is a really like odd situation for a team with so many talented attacking players. But it definitely seems to work because for me, like the reason like the lack of Alves is a problem, and the reason the reason Marcelo is so important is when you can have that guy who suddenly joins in central midfield or joins the attack. You don't know where he's come from. It's like this extra guy who's suddenly there. You know what I mean? And he's super talented, and suddenly you're in trouble and you're outnumbered.
Right. And then especially when you compare him to Barcelona's left back, Jordi Alba. Oh, wait. No, he's not
injured,
there.
Right?
He's going to be injured.
Yeah.
So it's probably going to be Digne in there. And so I think, again, that's another thing where you're going to have another less experienced. Digne is still a very good player, but less experienced as your two outside backs than you're going to have for Real Madrid. And you do have Marcelo bombing forward, creating attacking options. It's just another player that you have to worry about, and you have to kind of keep people positioned so that you don't have to scramble to deal with Marcelo when he comes flying into the box with his hair akimbo.
So what happens if it's akimbo means apart, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. He's going to be flying back and forth. It's going to split.
So what happens with, say, Messi versus Marcelo, right? If Messi wanders centrally and Marcelo wanders all over, does that cancel each other out, or does that leave space for one or the other?
I mean, ask Germany. It leaves space, and so I think if Barcelona wanted to capitalize on that, it is a situation when you could have Messi come central, and then it's a gamble. But if Messi comes central, Marcelo gets that ball and he pushes up that left channel. If Messi or Suarez go back over onto that right-hand side, Barcelona are able to win that ball back and play it quickly up the field. Now you've got a wide open space to get into and get in behind.
But on the flip side, if you're Messi and you're not tracking back and Marcelo is allowed to wander forward and Sergio Roberto's maybe the weak link at right back, then you've got Marcelo and probably Cristiano Ronaldo combining down that left and picking on Sergio Roberto and Leo Messi not helping out.
Yeah, that's frightening.
Or is all of this null and void because Luis Enrique will be like, all right, Leo Messi, I know that I've given you all this freedom recently and told you to like save your energy. Today's different. Today you're going to do some defending, young man.
Maybe. We shall see.
Who is 30, right?
But I just don't think that that's a job he's going to really ask him to do. If anything, I would say it's a job that he'll ask the midfield to really worry about a lot more. And maybe
Rakitic shuttle over, maybe.
That's the thing, is maybe we'll see more work from Rakitic and maybe that continued physicality from Rakitic, where maybe he'll not mind breaking up play either legally or illegally. Maybe he gets a card, maybe he concedes a few fouls here and there, but it's a way to break up play and shut down that kind of free-flowing attack. Or at least, let me rephrase that, free-flowing counterattack.
Right. Speaking of Real Madrid's counterattack, there's a giant piece of it missing, and he's Welsh, and his name is Gareth Bale.
Yes.
And he has had ankle surgery, and he's out until March. There will be no Gareth Bale in this game.
No.
What does that leave Madrid's options?
So it's going to be no Gareth Bale. We think it's going to be no Toni Kroos, but we think maybe Casemiro's back. So I think with that in mind, it probably points to Vasquez and Ronaldo on either side of Karim Benzema.
That makes sense to me. I can't even think of a way he would shake it up. Unless Isco's involved on the wing somehow, but I don't see that either.
No, I see Isco being dropped. I see Casemiro, Kovacic, and Modric being your more central midfielders.
And maybe Isco comes on later to sort of, if things open up a bit and you want some dribbly, you get Isco in there to open up some space.
And James stares on sadly from the bench.
Didn't even think of... So James scored in the Copa del Rey game, which means James played in the Copa del Rey game just a couple of days ago, along with a lot of youngsters, right? Including Zidane's son, including Odegaard.
Yep.
So it was very much like a youth B team. You're not playing for the first team.
Yeah.
That suggests James is not playing in this game.
It does. And I think you have a theory about why James isn't succeeding at Madrid. And because I had no idea. I was kind of shocked by this. And I think yours is the most logical of all explanations.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, obviously he's a very talented player, right? But I think James you need to build a team around.
Yep.
And I think almost every team on earth, like statistically, almost every team on earth would build a team around James.
Yeah. Colombia has, Monaco did.
Right. The only teams that wouldn't are probably Real Madrid, Barcelona. That might be it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But he just happens to be at Real Madrid. So, I mean, my advice to James, if I was his agent, would be, God, get a move, be the central figure in a big team that doesn't have to be the Galactico big Real Madrid team. earn your living there, enjoy your soccer.
Yes.
Instead, you're playing on essentially Madrid's second string.
Yes, and watching on as 11 other players take the field, one of whom we think is going to be Casemiro.
Yeah.
Now, Casemiro is in a similar boat.
Injury, right?
Yeah, he's in a similar boat to Andres Iniesta. He did play, I think he subbed on in the Copa del Rey at midweek, did not play last weekend, although Zidane has said he was fully fit, we just didn't want to risk it. And I believe said he'll be ready for next weekend, which to me implies that it's going to be Casemiro starting, unless that's Zidane doing some head games.
Right. Whatever happened to Luka Modric is starting.
That is very true,
right?
And he is very good.
Yes. So why do we love Luka Modric so much?
I mean, first of all, because he's tiny. But tiny doesn't matter when it's Luka Modric. It's his vision, it's his passing ability, and more than anything, it's his ability to remain incredibly calm under pressure. If there were ever an Armageddon situation when there's a meteorite hurtling towards Earth, I want Luka Modric on that shuttle that's going up to deal with it, because he's going to know how to handle the situation, get the asteroid into a position that he wants it to be in, and then he's going to exploit it. That's Luka Modric for you.
That is always, especially since Modric has been playing for Real Madrid, that has been the fascinating midfield battle, right? It has been about sort of Modric's wiles against Barcelona's midfield wiles of Busquets and Iniesta.
And I wanted to go back to that for a second, because I'm sure Barcelona fans and just neutrals alike are kind of amazed that we did an entire discussion of Barcelona without mentioning a man named Sergio Busquets.
Right.
And we also, in that the Graham Hunter, Guillem
Balaguer.
There we are. I'm just going to let you keep saying it. Discussion. They were mentioning how they wouldn't be surprised if Real Madrid really tried to put Biscuits, as we like to call him, under pressure, because he's been struggling of late.
Yeah.
And so you put him under pressure, you try to force that turnover at midfield.
But has he been struggling because Iniesta wasn't there?
That's the answer, and I think so. And so I think what you will see instead is, there'll be some pressure. I think you can't ignore how successful Man City were when they put Barcelona under pressure, but you do it here and there, and if it doesn't work right away, you drop back. And that's what I would not be surprised to see Madrid do, is do a little bit more compact defending, invite Barcelona all the way in, and then you look to hit them on a structured counterattack.
A structured counterattack?
Yes.
All right. That sounds good if you're a Real Madrid fan.
Yes, exactly.
Do you know where this game is not good?
Where is it not good?
The British Isles.
That's correct.
So in England, in Britain, in fact, there is a rule that no games can be televised live between the hours of 3:45 p.m. and 5:15 p.m. The reason being, if there's no football on television, they think people will go out and watch their local team play live, actual, in the flesh soccer, pay money at the gate, go see it. It's a very old rule. I think it's kind of worked, but I also think there's so much money in TV now, it sort of doesn't matter. I guess for your low league team, it makes more sense, right? So, because of this kickoff being moved to accommodate essentially the US and Asia, which is what the La Liga president has said, right? It's a commercial reason is why they've moved the kickoff back. People in England can't watch this game live, and they are furious.
I imagine, yeah. But it's okay, because all you have to do is just avoid every single media outlet anywhere, and then you'll be able to watch it as though no one else has seen it yet.
That's right. It's so hard to avoid spoilers on soccer, right?
Yeah.
Because it's everywhere. It's in the air.
And it's the Clasico. It is everywhere. It is seriously to the point that, didn't they say that they have structured this kickoff so they could basically be everywhere? So it would be available to people on the American West Coast, because it's going to be at, 7:15 is kickoff.
Yeah.
East Coast, 10:15. And then still in the Far East, it's going to be, prime time to eat to 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. I mean, on a Saturday night, that's great. Have a few drinks. Watch them play. It's going to be exciting. And the only people who I think lose out are England.
Yep. I can't help thinking this is somehow Brexit related.
I think it's more so no one would have a rule that silly, so we don't even need to worry about that.
I think it never occurred to them that could be a problem.
No. Because I do think and I don't know how it works in most other countries, all I can speak to is the United States, where it's so big that you have local blackouts, where you don't show the local game so that you incentivize going to the game. But you wouldn't just be no football games can be on TV so that people will go watch the one game that might be in their home stadium but might be out of town at that weekend. Doesn't really quite make sense. But when you have a tiny country with a lot of teams in one city, it makes more sense.
Yeah, you can find a football match in England.
Yeah.
You don't have to go far.
This is true.
So before we talk about TV options in the US, is there any other business from this game?
Yeah, I mean, I think we haven't really talked about Cristiano Ronaldo, who...
Who's this then?
Yeah, he's kind of decent. I think he's in your fantasy 11, but not mine. And it's just worth noting that he is in incredible form at the moment. 3 goals against Atletico, 2 against Sporting Gijón, loves scoring against Barcelona. So I think probably going to be a big game from Cristiano Ronaldo. I would bet at least 1 goal from the the much chiseled young man.
We also haven't really mentioned Luis Suarez, but that's because he has, no goals in 7 games?
1 goal in 5, I believe.
Okay.
In his last 5 La Liga games, at least.
Oh, I'm probably including Champions League to get to 7.
That would
Is
be
that where we're at?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I think you should probably expect a big performance from Ronaldo, and I think you should expect a big performance from him, because going back to what I was saying about the counterattack, I expect Barcelona to continue to play that high line like they like to do.
Yep.
And I think, again, if you look at that Man City game...
The way they get up with that possession on top of you, if you don't have a high line, there's a massive gap. So you've got to choose between, do we actually have possession and take the ball forward, or there's no choice, right?
Exactly.
You have to have a high line if you do that.
Right, but when you do that, there become these situations when the opposition has the ball, 15 yards from midfield, and your entire team is between that ball and midfield. Like, that's what Barcelona do. They squeeze you in and they make it hard, and then you have to play over the top.
That's why Mascherano actually makes sense as a centre-back, is because he's like a defensive midfielder who's stopping that counter-attack, right?
This is very true. Yeah. But if you can, and this is where I was saying, like, the structured counter-attack, that if it's not just kick it over the top and hope somebody runs onto it, but if it's a kind of quick passing, one person gets in behind you, play him, then you make a run off of him, he plays you the ball in, and you're moving it really fast, then it's not just direct and Mascherano can sprint back and make a covering slide tackle. We've seen him do 1,000 times. It's somebody can cover, but then the ball's moved, so now somebody else has to cover, and you've kind of dragged Barcelona out while making them transition back rapidly, and that leads to opportunities. And that's something I expect Real Madrid to do, unless Rafael Varane starts, in which case he'll just head the ball over the top like 80 yards, and then it'll be fine.
We saw him do that against Atletico, right? The biggest headers in the whole world.
Indeed.
But I think you're right about spreading it, right? If that backline's high, the way that you can stop a counter-attack is to sort of come central and crush it before it gets anywhere. But if you've got Ronaldo to the left, Vasquez to the right, Benzema is a threat in the middle. Benzema and Ronaldo have that thing as well where they switch sides, right? Like Benzema goes left and Ronaldo goes middle. And then if you do have Isco causing trouble in there, suddenly there's a lot of things to try and keep track of, and Barcelona can get spread out.
They're not so... Real Madrid aren't sponsored by BBV anymore, are they? Is that a long time ago sponsor?
No, I can't remember what
I just feel like they really missed an opportunity with... because it's Ronaldo now. Never mind. That was BBC. I was going to say, if you had Bale starting with Benzema and Vasquez, now it doesn't work anymore.
Well, they should have been sponsored by the BBC.
Yeah, exactly. That makes more sense. I was trying to make a BBV joke, but it didn't come off, so I apologize.
They should have been sponsored by the BBC, but then they wouldn't have been allowed to show the game in England still.
So if people in the United States would like to watch the game, where can they go, Mr. Grove?
So it's 10:15 a.m. Eastern, 7:15 Pacific. It is on beIN Sports. Not everybody has beIN Sports. You may have a local bar that shows it. You can find this game online. I believe, according to a piece of paper in front of me, Fubo TV, which is a streaming service, has a free 24-hour trial. So if you go to Fubo TV, Google that, you'll find their website. You should be able to get their free 24-hour trial, watch this game. I also know that Go90 is an app that is sort of, I think it's owned by Verizon, but has a relationship with beIN Sports. They will stream the game so you can watch that on your iPad or on your iPhone.
My one other bit of advice about this game, and I apologize if it comes off as offensive, but it's the reality. I've had situations when I was trying to find this game, there weren't any sports bars in the area where I was. Mexican restaurants will always be showing El Clasico.
All right, okay.
It won't be English language probably, but it will be on the TV there. So if you can find a Mexican restaurant that opens up at 10:15 in the morning, go there, and the game will be on.
Early lunch?
Yeah, why not?
Or Jueves Rancheros.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
All right, Taylor, final thing on today's show. The TSS Scouting Network,
Yes,
which
sir.
is filled with young men who are busy beating Portugal 7-1.
Yeah.
But we start with a Real Madrid player.
Indeed. The first report comes from KJ Van Eck, scouting Enzo Fernandez, and KJ Van Eck being the first ever TSS scout. Is that correct?
Still number one.
So Enzo Fernandez might not be a name that people are as familiar with. We'll get to why in just a second. But he is the young striker for Real Madrid's Castilla team, I believe, who got his first appearance. KJ Van Eck writes, Enzo made his first team debut for Real, coming on as a halftime substitute in Madrid's Copa del Rey victory over Cultural Leonesa, I believe. Even better, he got his name on the score sheet and afterwards referred to it as a dream come true. He also appears to be keeping his name as Enzo Fernandez as opposed to Enzo Zidane. He is Zinedine Zidane's son.
Did you see Zidane's quote after this?
No, I did not.
He said basically...
I tried to think of something funny really quickly and couldn't.
He said, as a coach, I'm just as happy for him as any other player. But if I take my coaching suit off, I'm really, really happy about it.
I'm trying to think of what manager out there would be like, mine was better. I know there are managers out there who would respond like that. Maybe Johan Cruyff would have about Jordi Cruyff doing things.
Well, Brian Clough famously used to just call Nigel Clough the number 9. He would only refer to him as the number 9 in interviews afterwards.
I love it. And congratulations to Enzo. Well done. Well done. Yes, so now let's get on to some U17s.
Okay, so as we mentioned, the U17s, US U17s beat Portugal U17s, not the senior team, 7-1. The next 3 players were all involved in that game. Wes Kaufman was not on that team, but he is scouting Ayo Akinola. Wes says, the Ontario-born forward started for the US Under-17s, a 7-1 win, and registered a goal and an assist. He did the legwork to set up Josh Sargent for the USA's second and drew the penalty that got the Americans their early lead. All that might explain why Will Parchman tweeted, quote, TFC Uber prospect Ayo Akinola, which doesn't mean he's going to graduate to driving cars, right? It means he's a really good prospect.
Yeah.
Is shredding Portugal's backline in Florida. Wes concludes that Akinola may get some looks for Toronto's senior team next season, but hopes he stays with TFC2 so we can all see him when he comes to Richmond. Because TFC2 will come and play the kickers.
And I'm going to go ahead and bat some cleanup here and say Kaufman, Ayo Akinola, and Ontario. That's my guesses for pronunciation. But while we're sticking with the U17s, I'm going to say James Jones, scouting Andrew Carlton.
We talked about him on the last show.
Yeah. Andrew Carlton also started last night against Portugal and managed 2 goals and an assist. He scored the opening goal via penalty kick and celebrated with a mannequin challenge, much to my chagrin.
I saw this. I thought it was a good mannequin challenge because it was nice and short. They didn't overdo it.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. He then had a volley from 20 yards out that he took very well and added a chasse. I didn't know what that was. I had to look it up. Not quite a shot, not quite a pass, so it's a chasse, to assist on Akinola's goal. The final point from James, he hammered that half volley at a tough angle with his left foot. His penalty and chasse of an assist were taken with his right. So basically, Andrew's very good.
I saw extended highlights of this game, and my take is that Andrew Carlton is the best player on this US Under-17 team.
Yep.
He's the star, he's the standout.
Agreed.
Yeah?
I mean, and you could see that
he knows it.
Just in the, not saying that this is a fair comparison, but it's the one that I'm going to go with. He reminded me of Luka Modric with Real Madrid, where he just is always so calm on the ball. He is able to get out of pressure situations, but he's there when you need him, and he does smart things on the ball.
He picked out a lot of passes that didn't result in goals, but they were incredible balls in behind that Portuguese defence.
So that's very impressive. The other thing that I've just realized about this team before we get to our final scouting report is that they had a choreographed celebration. And what that points to for me, has the United States ever had that, aside from Josie Altidore liking to do a certain dance, or maybe Charlie Davies liking to do a certain dance, and they would do it together?
There was Davies and Altidore doing that together, yeah.
Right, that's a dance. It's not a 4 or 5 player choreographed celebration, which makes me realize that this is a team that expects to score. That they have talked about in practice and said, when we score, not if we score, we're going to do this celebration, because they were all on point. They all knew exactly what to do and when to do it. That's interesting that it's a U.S. team who fully expect to score and clearly have justification for that expectation.
Well, that's why I brought up Carlton sort of knowing he's good, because he kind of has that grin that's like, yeah, I'm the best. And I almost in some ways it annoys me, but in other ways it makes me think, all right, this is a team of U.S. national team players that, they know what they're about.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
If only there were a local boy in there.
Well, moving on to our next scouting report. It's from Patrick Kennedy. Hello, Patrick. Patrick is scouting Chris Durkin. We know that Durkin plays he's with DC, right? He's signed as a homegrown player. Was on loan at our Richmond Kickers last season, so we've seen him in action. Durkin started against Portugal, Patrick tells us, and was deployed as a number 6. So he was the holding midfielder for this US team that beat Portugal 7-1. And really was winning balls, starting plays.
Yes, and it was very impressive again in how calm he was on the ball and how good of a shield he was for that back four. But I think my favorite thing is that we've talked about Andrew Carlton in relation to when we saw him for Charleston here in Richmond, that he looks 16. You can tell that he is a teenager because he is so small. You can see it in the team photo. Chris Durkin, the opposite.
Yeah,
he is huge. Like the coach. He's so big. It's ridiculous how tall that kid is, and I'm going to call him a kid.
And we've seen it. It's one thing playing U17 soccer, right? When you're 16 years old.
Oh, yeah.
We've seen Chris Durkin play in the USL against grown-ass men and absolutely physically hold his own.
Oh, yeah. I mean, to the point where I think he came in, we hadn't seen 2 games in a row because they'd been away, and then I think they had the friendly against Swansea where he had played. And so he came in and we knew he was in the team, and there was 2 other new players, and we couldn't figure out which one he was because he just looked oh yeah, he belongs. So which one is kind of shorter than the other ones? And I think we ended up with Travis Pittman as being maybe Andrew Durkin, Travis Pittman being a 30-year-old, 28-year-old defender. Not quite the same.
But he's not just a big dude, right? He's a smart dude, and he's got a great passing range from what I saw. So yeah, really excited about Chris Durkin.
I now feel bad because I think Travis Pittman is like 25 or 26. So apologies, Travis, if you're out there listening.
Well, we'll find out if he does today.
Yeah, true.
Thank you to everybody who sent us scouting reports. We obviously enjoy getting them. I feel like this has become the most fun part of the show now.
Yeah.
If you would like to join the Scouting Network, doing so helps us. You help us keep making shows. You support the show. Go to totalsoccershow.com/subscribe. All the information is there.
These are facts as well.
The other ways to support the show have recently been established. We've been really lucky to partner with Roughneck Scarves and Who Are You Designs. Right. If you go to totalsoccershow.com/shop, you will see the 2 TSS t-shirts made by Who Are You Designs and the scarf, the Total Soccer Show Hello and Welcome scarf made by Roughneck Scarves.
There we are. So thank you to Roughneck. Thank you to Who Are You Designs. And thank you to the people who have already ordered t-shirts and are waiting to get them in the mail. We are doing some shipping this evening. At least that's the plan.
Well, these are the t-shirts that we ship. Who Are You Designs do it professionally. You'll get those a lot faster.
This is probably true.
Some of these orders are from October.
I don't know what you're talking about.
All right, Taylor Rockwell, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Right back at you, amigo.
Listeners, thank you for listening. A reminder that we will be taking Friday off because we both have sore throats. I'm not sure who to blame, but I had brunch with Peyton, our former co-host. He was ill, and I felt ill the next day. So just saying. Hello, Peyton, if you're listening. All right, thank you, everybody, and we will talk to you again probably over the weekend after El Clasico.